Yeah, you ask them, oh, what was it? Was it to your expectations? Was it what you thought it was going to be? Were there any surprises?
Wow. So you guys created an artificial ice wall for your
Yeah,
guests to go ice climbing. I think that kind of puts it in perspective, just like the
yeah.
level of Welcome to the show, Scott. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, well, it's an honor for us as well. And yeah, I wanted to maybe just run through your background a little bit. I kind of titled this episode "Mr. Outdoor Hospitality" because I think you might have more experience in this industry than anyone in this continent. And
That is quite flattering.
so I'll walk through your background here just to give the audience a little bit of a snapshot. So maybe starting back as early as 1999 at a homestead as the director of recreation. And then moving into the resort at Paws Up and being on the founding team there as an assistant general manager and then director of recreation for 5 years from 2005 to 2011. And then Pine Butte Guest Ranch, the Nature Conservancy, which I believe was like a remote nature resort in Rocky Mountain Front, Montana. Is that
Correct?
correct?
Yes.
And then a general manager at Saratoga Hot Springs in Saratoga, Wyoming, at a hot springs resort
Correct.
for 8 years. And then to general manager at AutoCamp Yosemite for 2 years from 2021 to 2023. And now currently the general manager at Wildhaven Yosemite for almost 2 years, starting in September 2023. Is that correct?
Yes. You got it.
All right.
Got it.
Um, Amazing. Well, so many household names in there. I know, Paws Up Resort. I often credit Under Canvas for bringing glamping to the US. And I think they largely popularized it and made it a little bit more accessible. But the real true, I think, pioneers of bringing glamping to the US probably was Paws Up, bringing it in a meaningful way. And that was back in in 2005, and that's very much on the highest end of the spectrum. Very luxury, several $1,000s per night, all inclusive. I think Michelin star F&B, and then going to some more boutique properties like the Nature Conservancy in Saratoga Hot Springs, and then coming to kind of a household name, which is AutoCamp, which you're set really successful partnership with Hilton, scaled to around 10 iconic properties and wonderful locations, including Yosemite. And then now at Wildhaven, we fortunately had Ken Barber on a couple months back, who's the founder of Wildhaven. So if you haven't checked out that episode, go back and check it out. But Wildhaven is kind of the new up and coming glamping company in California, with their first location in Sonoma and their second in Yosemite, and looking to the horizon for more, and currently expanding the Yosemite location. And Scott and I had a chance to meet when I was doing a site visit out in Yosemite, and he was kind enough to show me the Wildhaven properties for the first time in the expansion, and we just ended up chatting for like an hour and a half, when we were on the property about your background and stories. And I was like, all right, I think we need to have you come on the air for an episode because this is rich. There's some good stuff in here.
It's always good when you get to cross paths with people with similar backgrounds that you can chat with. So that was a lot of fun.
So maybe we could just jump right in. And the first question I have for you is, having worked at such long stints at so many household names in outdoor hospitality and glamping, what what does it take, or like what does it really take to make a successful hospitality operation? Like what's the key? What's the key to doing that?
Well, sure. I mean, you said operation. It starts before operation. Obviously, location and accommodation is huge, but it's all important, right? I mean, the standard operating procedures, your policies, your organization, um, your flow charts. It's all important, but what and you'll probably I'll probably refer to it as we talk, but for me and what really guides my management philosophy is your team, having the right team in place.
I love it. Yeah, it takes the people, right? It's a people business. And if there was any kind of common pitfall where it was like, hey, this is the easiest way to ruin your business or your hospitality operation fast, like what would be a cautionary tale, or what people should definitely watch out for?
Sure, not to sound like a broken record, but a team not having the right people in the right positions. Um, but uh, beyond that, um, I'd say I think especially with new operations, um, wanting to be everything for everyone is a common pitfall, or overselling your property, selling it as something that you're not. Um, and it's really hard to be everything for everyone. A lot of companies try. I think the closest company that I worked for that was relatively successful with that would be Paws Up, because it's such a big operation and had so many staff. But um, really defining who you are and honing in on that, making that, being the best at it.
Hmm. Yeah, and and you're right. It's such a fine balance between marketing your property well. I mean, first off, you have to have a great product, right? You need to invest in good units. You need to have the right maintenance. You need to take care of the landscaping and the units themselves. And then there is, the photography and videography, and having that be high quality and well done, but also having it be representative of what's actually there, and not necessarily trying to like trick the guests. um,
And that could be also done in with your pricing model, your yielding practices. You may be able to get a certain rate, but should you? Is sometimes the question, because you may be getting a rate with that comes with a higher expectation. It may be something that fits your property, or and it may not.
yeah, how do you manage that? If you have an opportunity to raise rates, but it might say, if a guest is like, oh well, now I'm paying $400 or $500 a night or whatever it is, and it's going to raise their expect. How do you manage what you could earn versus trying to keep it in line with maybe guest expectation? I guess how do you walk that line? Is there any indicators?
That's tricky. Well, the indicators are certainly the feedback they get from the guests and their experience, and what their expectations were with what they felt they actually got. When you're starting to hear things like, uh, uh, you know, I was expecting something, but it may not have been it, and that's the first indicator, and you gotta, that's a decision made on the ownership level a lot of the times of where you want to strike that balance, and certainly one negative review could impact much more financially than the extra $200 you might have been able to get for that one room, right? So that's a big part of the consideration. Is you listen closely to the guests and their experience. Um, Part of the routine is we always ask our guests how they enjoy their stay, and we give them plenty of opportunity at the time of checkout. And we follow up with a text and email, and ask them specifically about uh, did they enjoy their stay? Is there anything that we could have done better?
So so you ask them upon checkout, you ask them in a follow-up text and a follow-up email, hey, how was your stay? Is there any other steps to that process in terms of either one, because obviously someone's checking out and you can say, hey, how was your stay, and that, but most of the time people's gut reaction is just going to be like, oh, it was good, thanks. Is there a way that you go one step deeper and go, no, seriously, how was it? Well,
Yeah, sure. Well, you ask them. Yeah, you ask them. Oh, what was it? Was it to your expectations? Was it what you thought it was going to be? Were there any surprises? Those are open-ended questions that give the guest the opportunity to expand a little bit more about. Yeah, it is a little different than what I expected. Your bathrooms were cleaner than I thought they would be. And those are the kind that you always enjoy hearing.
hmm hmm Yeah. And do you guys have any sort of system in place for reviewing? Because there's a lot of guests coming through the property and giving feedback to different people at different times and different medians of doing so. Is there a system in place for how you review that in a thoughtful and organized way?
Yeah, yeah, and it's time consuming to do it right because you get feedback from not only your directly from the guests, from response to the texts and the emails, but you also got to scour the internet, right? You look at Google reviews, you look at TripAdvisors, you look at Yelp or anywhere else that people can be leaving online reviews, and you put that into the mix as well. And so, yeah, we gather these all in, we organize them with the management team. We sit down in our weekly meetings and we review them. We look for outliers. We look for trends. Things that okay, this is something that's come up a couple of times. And, maybe someone has a good recommendation, but it may be something that if it takes a little bit more to implement, we just kind of put it on our radar and make note of it. And okay, if this comes up again, we'll have a further discussion about changing a practice or a procedure or whatever it may be. But yeah, it takes a lot of time to do it right. And then after reviewing it with the management team, we take it back and we review it with the staff. Every morning we have a stand-up meeting with the staff. That are coming in for the day, and we go through the reviews, and it's good too for the staff because it lets them know. It gives us a chance to give a lot of positive feedback and encouragement and accolades to the staff. Because the majority of the feedback that we do get is very positive, and it's good for the staff to hear that and know that, and that what they're doing does matter, makes a difference, and it makes the difference to the experience to the guests that are spending their hard-earned money to stay with us. So,
Very good.
yeah,
I love that. That's kind of how I structure even my feedback. When I am managing people or have a team, I just try to keep it super simple. And it's, what could have been better and what did we do well? It's like, giving some recognition of what was done well and celebrating that and being like, all right, what could we have done better? And just like an eye for improvement. It sounds like that's kind of exactly how you structured it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you always have to. Um, Again, going back to the staff, it's part of having the good team and the right team in place, and having a team that likes what they do, and they're the host and heart. Uh, you look for those types of people to help you run your property to deliver that experience to the guests. That's key and a crucial element of it. But a big part of that is making sure that they are thanked and they know that they're doing a good job. Yeah, you sure if they miss something, you point it out and you talk about it. But I make sure that I thank my staff every day for the hard work that they do. It's tough out there. It's especially with the housekeeping maintenance crew, the ones that are outside, and it gets warm here in the summertime. So um, it's not the same as doing housekeeping in a hotel where you have a cart and you're going from room to room in an air conditioned room in an air conditioned hallway. It's so it's important for me to have a good team and that they like what they do and then that they feel appreciated for what they do.
Yeah, and I heard someone say, I think this applies to all businesses, but like if you take care of your people, then they take care of your customers, and kind of having that attitude, and yeah, wise words.
Absolutely. Sir William Branson also had a really good quote. He says, "Train your train your staff so they can leave. Treat them so they will stay."
I Beautiful words. Very Yes, very powerful. And do you have like a thoughtful touch that you liked, if there was like any sort of like Scott Randall signature move of something that you've just like to incorporate in your guest experience, either in past properties, and then is there anything that you do at Wildhaven at your current property that just leaves like a really creates a special moment or a connection with the guest?
Yeah, sure. Well, we do a lot of the things that uh, you might find at other properties. We if you're having a special occasion, anniversary, birthdays, we give complimentary s'mores kits. We leave handwritten notes, and so we actually take the time to write notes for these special occasions. Um, but I think that again, the biggest thing is I reiterate with my staff all the time. Make sure that they know that we're happy they're here, uh, and that they elected to choose us. The vast majority of time, people don't go back to any place of business. It's not because they felt like they had bad service, but it's because they felt like they had apathetic service. So it starts with finding the people that have that attribute of being a host in heart and bringing that out in them, and saying, okay, now when you're here, you're on stage. It's very much like you're a performer on stage a lot of the time, and you're greeting the guests and just uh, being very genuine about making them feel like they're coming home and that they're very very welcome. Um, uh, I I was just gonna say one example that I use with my staff all the time is it doesn't have to be the guest service staff. Even it could be the housekeepers, it could be the maintenance team. When those individuals stop and talk to a guest and ask them how their stay is going, it really it surprises the guests a lot of the time, because they expect that from the guest service team, but from a maintenance team. I use an example or share a story with my team about a time that my wife and I traveled to Jamaica, and it was the end of our vacation, and we were rolling to the lobby with our bags, and we were going kind of slow because we were ahead of the shuttle and we had some time, and the gardener stopped, and he saw that I was kind of going slow, and he said, "Yeah, hey man, you're going 5 mile an hour in a 10 mile an hour zone. You can always come back." So that's always stuck with me. It's like for the gardener to stop and just see that yeah, I'm a little sad about going home, going back to the reality, and if we can do that, we can translate that into the guest experience. Um, it means everything to them. So I mean, even this morning, I had a guest come in, and she said, "Oh, are you Scott?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, I want to thank you. You made my vacation." I was like, "Oh, how did I do that?" And he's like, "Well, I called in the other day and I was going to be a late arrival, and you saw that I had a tent with bunk beds in it, and you asked if I had children, and I didn't, and so you upgraded me into a premium one queen tent that was a little bit nicer." And so, well, it's easy to do, and I know you didn't have kids, and so I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, I keep repeating what you said in my head, which is we're happy that you're here. And and just that exact verbiage I think hits the nail on the head. And I can attest that you are in fact creating that at Wildhaven Yosemite when I was just there a few days ago. And I felt that way as soon as I walked in and had a chance to meet you and Rochelle, and like you you took so much time with me, and I didn't feel like I was rushed, and I don't know, like it just felt like there's just kind of an instant connection, and you're happy that, yeah, I wasn't even a paying guest, right? I
Yeah.
was just a guy stopping by. Um, and the amount of time that you took to walk me through the beautiful property and show me the views and the different units and all the cool things that were being added. um, I was just like, wow, he's really making me feel like like a real special person to get all this time and attention. So I think you're really
Oh, yeah.
enacting it.
All the guests should, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's why
You mean that wasn't just for me?
well, yeah,
I'm just
I mean,
kidding.
certainly we were very excited to have you there, but I do struggle sometimes when we talk about we have a VIP guest coming because it's like, well, yes, we want to make sure that we make special note of it, but all of our guests are VIPs.
Mm, mm, very good. All right, Scott, let's talk about h- how'd you end up getting into outdoor hospitality?
Yeah, so I've always loved the outdoors. Born and raised of a suburb of San Jose, but was very active in Boy Scouts when I was young. And that was always our family vacation every summer was to go camping with family. And so, with those experiences as a childhood, I developed such a great love for the outdoors and everything outdoor related. Uh, Certainly, all the fun you can have in the outdoors. So I got my degree in management of recreational facilities, outdoor recreational facilities, emphasis management of recreational facilities, and that's how I ended up in the resort industry. I started managing the recreation divisions of properties. You mentioned earlier the Homestead Resort in just outside of Park City, Utah. It was the first, and I was there for 6 years as the recreation director there, and then moved on to the resort of Paws Up, and I was, as you mentioned, part of the opening team there, and was hired as the director of recreation, which was a huge operation. If you are familiar with resort, recreation is a huge part of what they offer there. And just about any activity you can imagine, we offered it for the guests. And we did it all in-house with two exceptions. We didn't do the dog sledding in-house because we didn't want to own 200 mushing dogs, and we didn't do the hot air ballooning in-house because we didn't want to be a pilot of hot air balloon industry. But yeah, I was doing that at the resort of Paws Up, and I did that for 3 years when I was offered and accepted a promotion to become the assistant general manager. And that's what sent me down the path of general management in resorts and um, outdoor properties. I've been very fortunate in my career that all the properties that I've been at would been more or less boutique properties and very much outdoor emphasis, outdoor related, rural niche.
From ending up as the director of recreation at Paws Up, I think that's the dream job. And talk about a blank canvas. So, they boast, I think it's 36 or 38,000 acres of land, a river, mountains, streams, and I mean, if you look on their website, it's just every kind of activity you can imagine. I mean, you mentioned two of them: dog sledding, hot air ballooning, horseback riding, archery. I mean, all the things you could imagine.
Everything, yeah, yeah. And in fact, it's probably much easier to try to find and identify things that if you're looking for things that they don't do, which is really anything that I can think of. They had a lake house, so did jet skis, ski boats, um, and it was very much a blank canvas when I got there. Um, I was actually hired not much more than a month before opening. I was replacing uh, uh, someone else who decided that they wanted to go and do their own thing, and there was not a lot in place. There was a lot of work left to be done in that month. I didn't have a lot. The majority of the equipment needed. Didn't have um, the majority of the programs in place or the where the tours, the logistics of all the tours, um, the the permitting with the National Forest and the BLM was not in place, and of course didn't have any staff either. So it was a wild ride.
So today I know, Paws Up is in the $2,000 to $4,000 a night per person, all inclusive of almost all rates and almost all food and activities. I think there's a couple special add-ons and buy-ons. But what was it like back in 2005 when you started? And yeah, how did it look kind of on day one, and how did that evolve over the next 6 years that you were there?
So on day one, it was just 19 cabins. 19 cabins, uh, and not really knowing that it was going to become such a big operation. Over the time that I was there, we opened 6 campgrounds, the glamping campgrounds that were all along the banks of the Blackfoot River, and a number of they called them cabins, but they were basically 3,200 square feet homes that were out in the wilderness there. Um, so it became quite an extensive operation. Um, like we alluded to, it wanted to offer everything that we can think of, and we started um, with some of the basics like the horseback riding and river rafting, because the beautiful setting on the Blackfoot River there. Um, but the question was, how did it grow? How did it evolve?
I guess, yeah. What was it like? What type of rates were they charging on day one? And so, and then a couple clarifying questions. You said there were 20 cabins, like hard-sided cabins, and then they added 6 tents in addition to that, or did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so there was actually 19 hard-sided cabins, and then over the 6 years that I was there, we added 6 campgrounds. Now, uh, so each campground had 8 tents, and each tent could sleep generally 4 people. It was something to do with the laws of Montana. The reason why they did a bunch of smaller campgrounds instead of one big one. And some of these campgrounds were separated no more than by 100 or 200 yards. But each one of the campgrounds had their group of tents. They had their own dining pavilion. Um, the tents had the restroom facilities they were attached to the tents themselves, and they each had their own camp butler that came with each campground, and chef for the campground. So those 6 campgrounds were added pretty close to one a year over the 6 years that I was there, and then an additional 20 um, big homes that I mentioned, 20 big homes, and then I had a few other uh, accommodations there as well, original accommodations that were converted from previously ranch accommodations.
And so there's 6 campgrounds of approximately 8 tent units each, so around 48 glamping tents added over those 6 years.
Correct.
Yeah. And they're pretty big tents, right? And they have in-suite bathrooms, flush toilets, full utilities on
Yeah,
decks.
they're most of them. And some of them were geared towards 2 people, and those were a little bit smaller. But most of them would accommodate 4 people, and these tents, they had like a master bedroom with a king size bed in it, a ceiling fan. They were decked out to the hilt. The one of the owners, the owner's wife, Nadine Lipson, she hand selected everything that went into every single accommodation herself, very meticulously. Um, and there was also a dividing wall in the tents, and so there was a sub room that generally had 2 twin beds in it. and then an attached bathroom. Most of these bathrooms had heated tile floors, rain showers, big garden tubs. So very lavish,
Hmm.
very much puts the G in glamping.
Yeah, very, very glamorous. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but being able to go to Paws Up is probably like my ultimate bucket list of like properties and locations to go to in the world. So someday I'm gonna go, maybe for my honeymoon or something like that.
Yeah, no, I certainly would recommend it to anyone. The location alone is just very well. It's very Montana, on the banks of the Blackfoot River, which of course the Brad Pitt movie "A River Runs Through It" was
Oh, I
way
didn't
out.
know that.
Yeah,
Very cool. And so is Paws Up more geared towards families or romantic couples, or is it very agnostic in that regard?
it is very agnostic. We went from couples. It was a big family destination and actually a big three generational destination because of the accommodation types we had with the big homes. Uh, we get family groups that have the kids, the parents, and the grandparents all together
That's cool.
sharing accommodations. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Very cool. I'd be curious to hear what your take is going from, at least I know, so Paws Up, AutoCamp, and Wildhaven, as far as I understand, are all relatively agnostic in the sense that I'd say they cater both to families and romantic couples and like young professionals. And, I, sometimes I try to caution people away from that. I try to say, hey, pick a customer experience and really nail that rather than trying to be all things for all people. Um, but there's obviously a lot of people out there doing it successfully. And I guess from an operations standpoint, in your experience, like how do you manage that tightrope, or how do you walk that line of being like, hey, this property is a really special place for a romantic couple who's trying to have their anniversary versus young family with their young kids, wanting to kind of like let the kids run wild. Like how do you manage all of that in the same location?
So it's really more what the guests are looking for, right? So that's the commonality of them. They're looking for an outdoor experience, or in the case of a glamping property, a camping experience without having to put forth the work. And so they all have that commonality, and they're all looking for that same experience. Uh, Enjoy the outdoors, enjoy the recreation, and enjoy the experience. Now, I mean, you alluded to couples versus families, and sometimes there is a little bit of a conflict there, but generally not. I found in these types of properties because even the couples that are coming here, they know what kind of accommodation they're coming to, and they're coming to an outdoor accommodation that is very suitable for families, and so they expect that. Now, if we get special requests to maybe try to find a unit that's a little further removed and a little bit quieter, we will do everything we can to accommodate that. But honestly, it hasn't at the properties that I've been at. I think it's just been baked into it. Baked into it. People expect it.
So at Paws Up, there was never one campground was a little more focused towards couples and the other towards family. It was all kind of co-mixed.
There was one campground that was couples. Yeah, yeah, and it didn't start off that way, but it evolved into that and became predominantly that after I left. But it was their first campground. It's funny when we opened it, the owners called it Tent City, which we always thought was like, ooh, are you sure you want to call it Tent City? Later, they, I think, changed the name to Moonlight Campground, which was much more appealing. And Tent City always reminded some of us of what you might find in a downtown park area. That, uh,
Yeah.
but Yeah, they did have one, and that worked well.
Hmm.
But of course, when you go to and they had their own private dining there too, and so they really didn't have to leave that campground. But when they would go out and participate with the activities, of course, they were generally mingling with the guests in general.
What's so it sounds like approximately each year they'd add a new campground and add, around six more tents. What were like the lessons learned from the first one you guys built and the units and the layouts and the amenities and interior design, and how did that change from the last one and like what you learned along the way?
Um, well, so the first one that was put up actually had the bathrooms that were separated in the bathhouse. They each had a private bathroom uh, with the 8 accommodations. They each had their own specific bathroom, but there was a little bit of a walk to get to it. And with the clientele that we serviced at Paws Up, we soon learned that if there was an option once they rebuilt the second one and had uh, the the bathrooms attached to the tents, uh, that was definitely more sought after in the reservation process. So that one actually um, was remodeled, partially because of that, to get the bathrooms into the tents, but partially it was, well, actually a big part of it was mistakenly built on a conservation easement, so it had to be moved over about 1,000 yards.
Gotcha. And what kind of price, what was like the price point from, in those early days? And was it all inclusive or did it turn into that later?
I turned into that later. So as far as the tents went, they were about $900 a night when we opened. The accommodations, the cabins we would call them, they ranged from around $900 a night up to $2,500 a night. Um, at the time, it was not all inclusive. It was a la carte. Uh, in fact, when we first opened, we weren't even on the American meal plan, so all the dining was a la carte as well. Um, and that after a couple of years, we offered the American meal plan and found that it made more sense and was more popular, and so that's when it transitioned into um, the dining was included. Uh, at the time that I left, 6 years into it, the activities were still a la carte, which is quite a feat because I, these activities, as you would imagine, they they were top dollar, just like the accommodations were. So sometimes we get a family or a family reunion coming in, and no, it wasn't even way back then. It wasn't too uncommon to see 10, maybe even $20,000 being dropped in a week's vacation.
So the activities were a la carte when you were there. What do you have a general opinion on going all inclusive? I guess, do you think it was the right move to make food and drink and activities all inclusive, or was that just easier and better guest experience, or yeah, what makes sense?
It certainly is easier operationally. Yeah, it certainly is easier operationally. It does open up other challenges because some activities are more popular than others, and so you have to put limits in place because when you have people that are there and they are spending a week, they want to do it all, and they got to give the next guest the opportunity to do it all as well. And so, but operationally, going all inclusive does make a lot of sense. Um, and even when they would go all inclusive in situations like that, um, even when we weren't all inclusive, we had our schedule, right? And so the guests would sit down and they go, okay, you have all these schedules of activities, and we want to go horseback riding on Tuesday at 1, and on Wednesday we want to go. And so they look at their schedule, and the majority of those are were set schedule that guests can make their reservations for, which were available for all the guests. Um, Again, because of the clientele that we serviced, a lot of them wanted to do their own thing when they wanted to do it. And so we made that available to them, and gave them the opportunity to book private experiences. And then, of course, there was a surcharge associated with that. So,
Gotcha. So if someone wanted to, do their horseback riding at a different time, they could do that. It was just going to be extra. That make
right, right. And we learned early on how to do that, and that we actually had to do that before the property was opened and before I even got there. I think the reservation team was instructed by ownership to uh, just get them there. Close get the booking done. We'll do whatever it is they want to do. Just get them to the resort. And so
we'll figure out how to do it later.
yeah, we'll figure out how to do it later. And so that's where I came in. And boy, we got to figure out how to do this now. And so that was the challenge before us. So we had all our set schedules and everything, but then we had all these people that were promised special things during the reservation or the reservation process. And so how to figure out how to accommodate them, making sure that they got what they were promised.
What was the most, like, maybe just off the wall idea that you had to try to execute on or make happen and you're like, all right, well, let's how are we going to do this?
So that's the thing about I always marvel. I worked a lot with owners of different properties, and a lot of times, they're very revolutionary. They're very forward thinking, and they're visionaries, right? They have a lot of big ideas and schemes, and a lot of times, they hire you to share your experience and to convey that to them, and say, well, my experience suggests that maybe that may not be the best course of action for whatever reason. And they say, thank you very much. I appreciate your candid feedback, but we're going to. And so you go along with it, and you give it 100%. And, a lot of times you leave going, yeah, I was right. It didn't work. But there's that one time out of 5 that you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that worked. But to answer your question, at Paws Up, our spa, where we provided spa services, massages, was also in tents, just like the glamping tents were. And it was a seasonal operation, and we did it in the tents in the nicer weather. And then we moved the spa into one of our lodging accommodations during the colder winter months. The owner decided that the tents really needed to be operational year-round for spa service. And I don't know if you've visited Montana in the middle of winter time, but I've seen negative 42 there. And so to try to conduct a massage in a canvas wall tent, and he's like, no, we'll put heat tape around the plumbing, and we'll put infrared lamps in the tents. It'll be great. It'll be wonderful. Well, certainly, sure enough, we had our first cold snap. Our pipes started breaking, and our toilet bowl started cracking, frozen water, and our poor massage therapists were giving massage, and we're trying to keep them. So yeah, that was one that wasn't great concept, but needed a little bit more to make it a practical reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, and was there any? What did the creative process look like when you're, just starting, and Paws Up's in its first couple months, and all you have is this great property and an idea. Like what did that creative process look like for being like, hey, what do we want to do here? What are we going to offer? How are we going to prioritize this? How are we going to make this happen? Like, how did that go?
Yeah, well, so you start off with kind of a list of activities that you think the guests would enjoy at such an amazing property, and then you write down the resources that would be needed to conduct that activity. For example, ATV tours. You got to have ATVs, and you got to have helmets, and you got to have a certain number of guides per ATV, one in the front and one in the back, and you got to share the resources of the ATVs, and so you got to figure out the schedule that works to accommodate as many people that flow through as possible, and you want to offer some variety, and so you don't want just a 1.5 hour ATV ride. You want to offer a 1.5 hour ATV ride and a 3 hour ATV ride. So you do one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and maybe every other day you offer a 5 hour ATV ride. And so it's just a lot of uh, brainstorming, a lot of excitement. I mean, it's a lot of fun. Just thinking of the possibilities, and and then getting out in the property and trying it, and going through it, and that was a lot of fun too, because you had your team of guides that you were training and getting ready for and you would go out and you would experience it yourself, and find out what worked and what didn't work. Oh, another, you asked about crazy things that, so when we opened, the owners very much wanted, it was on the Blackfoot River, 7 miles of the Blackfoot River went right to the property, and so river rafting was a big part of it. Well, he wanted this experience where you would raft about halfway down, and the guests would get out, and they would have their traditional meal that you would have halfway through your rafting experience. But he wanted it to be a fine dining experience, with white linens, and this was out in the middle of nowhere, so he had to figure out how to get everything out there with the chef and how he's going to cook it, prepare it, and keep it warm. You never know exactly when they're going to show up because of the flow of the one. So that was another one of those visionary ideas that it did evolve, and it did get simplified a lot, because the logistics of it just didn't work on the scale that we were trying to accommodate in the number of people. Now, people could still elect for that, and I mentioned before having private experience. That was a private experience that we offer people. And, if they wanted to pay the surcharge associated with making that happen, and then you're doing it just for a couple or a family. It's that easy. But boy, how that looks. A lot of trial and error. Yeah, and just ordering the equipment, talking with the right reps from the various vendors, and making sure you get all the right equipment that you need, and um, uh, going out and trying it.
Was there anything that you thought would be super popular and kind of fell flat, or just, from a logistics standpoint was unrealistic? And was there anything that you thought would fall flat that turned out to be a huge hit and was really popular and became kind of like a staple activity?
Well, I don't know if it's something that I thought would be uh, popular, but the owner one time, they had this amazing riding arena, indoor riding arena, and it had what we call the skybox, which is basically like a skybox at a sports arena. Um, and the owner wanted to do gymnastics in there for the guests. And that one never really did. It didn't go very far. Um, Another one that we did, and it was popular, but the logistics of doing it every year was um, a lot was ice climbing. We created a 40-foot ice climbing wall, and so we got 40 feet of scaffolding. We wrap it with chicken wire, and we would freeze and go up as we would freeze and create a top roping experience for the guests.
Wow.
That one was extremely popular. The biggest challenge there was um, it was you just it's so slow to get the number of guests that you can get through it. It was difficult to make it worth the while with the amount of guests you can actually get with it when you get the guests and you get them all suited up, you get them harnessed up, you get the crampons and their ice axes, and you go through all the safety and you get them on the rope and go through. It takes a while, and there's one that again, if they wanted to do privately, you call
Wow. So you guys created an artificial ice wall for your
it.
guests to go ice climbing. I think that kind of puts it in perspective, just like the
Yeah,
level of that
yeah,
is,
a lot of fun. Yeah.
yeah, amazing. And
Actually, that was an idea that I took with me. I did that first at the homestead. And so we did that on the tennis courts at the homestead resort. Again, with 40 feet of scaffolding, same concept.
was that your idea and you created it?
Yeah, yeah, me and my team.
Wow. Oh my goodness. What that is, that's a crazy one. I've always wanted to do ice climbing, so God, I wish. And so the glamping is closed in the winter months, so all the tents are put into storage, and but all the cabins are still, so Paws Up is still open and operating in the winter, just with the hardwall units.
Yeah, they experimented back and forth a little bit the first couple of years. They started opening year round, and then we went to short-term seasonal layoffs. I think actually the first year we closed for a season. Then he wanted to open for Christmas and New Year's, and then close down for a season. So we're hiring and then destaffing, and then hiring and destaffing. Um, but yeah, the at least when I was there, all the tents came down every year, which in and itself is just an enormous operation. I mean, you can imagine these tents are huge, and the logs that we would put them up with were full blown trees, and then of course all the furniture, and then, the beds, the headboards, the art that was on the wall, the mattresses. So that was a huge operation. I do know, and I don't know where it ended up landing. They were doing some experimentation with a rain fly that had a visqueen on the top of it, so the snow would slough off of it, with the hopes of leaving the tents up year round. Um, I don't know if that ever worked out for them or not.
Oh, that's such a head. It's just a logistical mountain to climb.
It is.
Just the packing up and unpacking, and the wear and tear on both the tent and the canvases, but mostly the furniture.
Yeah. The tents too, taking the tents up and putting them down and storing the tents is really tricky, because if they're not absolutely 100% dry, they'll mildew or mold, and they'll have crease stains of how they were full with mildew and mold.
Yeah, gosh. And so you didn't. I would have thought the logs would stayed up, the framed logs. Those you took those down too.
Well, most of the vlogs did, but some of them for the rainflies had to be removed in order to access the tent.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Man, yeah, that's the challenge of just
Yeah,
campus-based units, especially in Montana of all places. It's just
yeah,
so hard. And you guys have nice luxury furniture like big chests and big bathtubs and big
heavy.
mirrors and king
Yeah,
size
yeah.
mattresses. Like what's the line in Jurassic Park? Like what? Is it heavy? Okay, well then put it down because it's
It's
expensive.
expensive. Yeah, it's heavy. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so I'm sure everything was heavy in that room.
Yeah, yeah. Alright.
Oh,
But yeah, the cabins stayed open year round, and by year three, we ended up staying open throughout the winter. Adding, of course, that's when we added our winter activities. Snowmobiling was a very popular one. Cross country skiing. I mentioned the dog sleds earlier. Um, Very popular around the holidays, Christmas, New Year's. It was very popular.
when you're kind of at an ultra luxury property, what's like the attitude or the training for the staff for service and like how to treat guests, and was that different than other places, or I guess, yeah, is it different and how is it different?
It it should. I was just about to say it should be different, but it goes back to my theory of or philosophy of everyone's a VIP, right? And so there's different levels of casualness, I guess. Wildhaven is a lot more relaxed of an environment than say a Four Seasons. Um, but Paws Up really had kind of the best of both worlds because it was super luxury and catered to that clientele. But because of the environment we were in, we were also very casual and relaxed. Our uniform was uh, Levi jeans, blue Levi jeans, which is not something you would find at a Four Seasons. But as far as the staff, I've had the same philosophy of looking for and training staff throughout my career. And like I mentioned, it's very much dictated by management style and philosophy. You start off by looking for individuals that would self-identify themselves as hosts. They like being a host. They like pleasing others. They like making sure the people around them are happy and taken care of. And then getting them to build on that natural, because that's an attribute, right? We're talking about people's attributes. We can teach skill sets for a lot of this stuff. Um, I use the example, I used to interview, Michelin 5-star chefs, fine dining chefs. You could be the best chef in the world. You get in the kitchen and you start banging pots and pans, throwing knives, and yelling at your team. And I'm gonna look for the second best chef in the world. Now, when you're talking chefs and specialty skill sets, of course you gotta find those. You gotta find the right individuals. But I look for attributes before I look for skill sets, and I'm very upfront about that. Um, as the AGM at Paws Up, one of my responsibilities was to be the second interview for every single candidate that came through the property. So the first, well, actually the third interview. So the first interview was with HR. The second interview was with the department head. So it was food and beverage or activities or lodging. And then the third interview was supposed to be with either myself or the general manager. And the general manager was, of course, very busy. And so I did the vast majority of those interviews. And it's always been, I talked to them about, yes, skill set. And I let the department heads do the heavy screening for skill set purposes because they know what they need and they know what they want. But I talked to the candidate about um, what it is I look for, and it's that attribute set, and that I look for those individuals, and that's a little tricky too, because I come around and tell them, I have this speech, this soapbox speech that I tell every single candidate, every single one, and even here at Wildhaven, when I interview, I give this little soapbox speech about trying to find individuals that want to be that host and heart, that are there not only for the guests and the guest experience, but for their team members' experience. They have their team members back, and the team members have their back in return, and they want to help foster that environment where the team enjoys what they do and likes coming to work. It's very important to me that my team likes what they do and where they work. Uh, but that's where it gets tricky because I obviously you talk about this in every single, and I've never once have I had someone, nope, that's not me, I don't like people, I don't like yeah, no, never mind, I'm out. So but I do tell them, I says that, if it's not you and it's not your natural attribute set, don't do it to yourself, because you're gonna be miserable. You're probably not gonna last long, and you're gonna make us here miserable. And then, turnover is costly for you and for us. And so if it needs be, 2, 3, 4 months, however down the road, if red flags start popping up, I may come to you and say, hey, remember during the interview process, remember that conversation we had? Okay, now's the time we reflect upon that.
I think that soapbox speech that you're talking about is so important because you're communicating the value or the mission statement or the ethos of the property or of the team, where it's like, hey, you mentioned the attribute of a host or this attitude towards the guest where we're happy that you're here, or wanting your team to enjoy coming into work and that type of environment for the staff. And I think it is so important because people should know after their interview with your company what you value, and that needs to come across. And that's the first touch point of a potential teammate, and then it needs to continue through when they're hired and when they're through actions. But like having that communicated from the very first step is super important to making sure you get people who are aligned with those values, and they can self-select out if it's not them.
Yeah, and it's such a critical part of it too, right? I mean, we spend so much time focusing in on the skill sets. Do you know how to cook? Do you know how to wait a table? Do you know how to give a massage? But again, you could be the best at those things and make life miserable for yourself and everyone around you if you're not the right person for the guest.
I've got an anecdotal experience that totally reminds me of that. And it was just going to like a gym where they, you lift weights and train. And there's just a teacher who knows mechanics and physiology really well and is like always telling me how to do different exercises better, and clearly has high skill and high education in the mechanics and the biology behind those movements. But I never felt like they were happy that I was there, and I stopped going. And I was just like,
Yeah.
you know what? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you probably never felt like he didn't want you there, right? But
It's neutral.
Apathetic. It's whatever. I hope you live.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned it's important. So how do you test around this attribute of being a host, or like having that heart of hospitality? How do you do that in an interview process and try to vet that?
So I talk to them, and I try to have a dialogue. I'm a very candid interviewer, and I'm a very casual interviewer as well. And I have a conversation with them, and I start grading them from how they communicate with me, their people skills, and the experiences that they share with me hold a lot of weight. And if they're telling me about experiences where they've had an opportunity to fix something for someone, or to go above and beyond or something, that's what I look for, and that's I look for and I try to ask open-ended leading questions that give them the opportunity just to talk and just to tell me about their life experiences, what makes them click, what they're into, what they've gained out of their career, or what they hope to gain out of their career. So it is tricky. You don't always get it right.
Hello, listeners. This is Sherry Halala, founder of Sage Outdoor Advisory. If you're launching an outdoor hospitality project like glamping, we can help. We offer feasibility studies and appraisals. What that means is we look at your specific market and proposed business offering and complete an in-depth analysis to make sure that your planned business will be profitable. Getting a second opinion on your proposal and forecasted financials is critical to understand before you spend years of your time and hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is particularly important if you are looking to raise money for your project from a bank or private investors. They are going to want to see this type of deep dive analysis from an independent third-party specialist in the industry. We at Sage have completed well over 250 feasibility studies and appraisals in outdoor hospitality in North America in the last 4 years. So we understand what it takes to bring a project from concept to reality. If this sounds like it could be helpful to you, you can go to our website, sageoutdooradvisory.com, and schedule a call with our team. While you're there, check out our proprietary glamping database map too. Thanks. Now back to the show.
What's some like maybe examples of green flags in the way that they speak or talk about experience? And are there any red flags where you're like, oh, no, this probably isn't a good fit?
Yeah, and again, it's being that host. If they identify or self-identify as being a host, and being part of a team, being a team member, being able to give instructions and directive, but also able to receive and take instruction. That's the green flag is attitude, and and sometimes it's hard because some people get really nervous in the interview process and their true selves don't really come through, and you got to do a little bit more digging or follow up questions and try to find out. But
would you do references for people that you hired? Would you call their references?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Would you have any questions you'd ask the references to try to get more insight?
Yeah, I do have like, and a lot of places, well, not a lot of places, but some places won't. They'll just tell you, yeah, they work for us during this time period, and that's all that their policy allows them to share with you. But if they're willing to share, I ask them like 5 questions, and they're really easy. They're based on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the best, and I ask them about being a team player. I ask them about how do they take directive, how do they receive directive. I ask them about their initiative. Were they a self-starter? Were they motivated? And so, yeah, absolutely. I've got those questions and it's just quick, easy, an opportunity to give me some good feedback and not take a lot of the references time. And then I say, anything else you think I should know about the interview? And that's when you really find out, whether or not it's a good candidate, right? Say anything else, because a lot of times I get, man, I wish they were coming back here, So, but yeah, absolutely, call the references.
How much of your time do you think, when you were the AGM or just at any of the properties, do you spend on hiring?
A lot. A lot. I mean, even for this property, which we have in the peak of the busy season, around a dozen to 15 employees. I spend a lot of time, and it depends on the property and the process and the support team. For example, at Paws Up, I didn't generally get too heavy into the questions regarding skill set, like I mentioned, and the HR department would ask. They would do the reference checks, things like. On a smaller property like this, I do it all, right? And so I gotta make sure I get to the skill sets, and then I talk about what I look for in attributes, and then I follow up with it. And the position, a lot of it is that some positions are a lot harder to fill than others. One position that's a challenge, no matter, I think probably wherever you go in the industry, maintenance is always tough. Because you're looking for someone with a certain type of skill set, but they're also someone that may have the same kind of skill set that can go frame houses and earn twice as much money, doing so. So maintenance is a tricky one, and one that I'll spend a lot of time on trying to screen candidates and find the right one.
How do you find success hiring for, something like that, like a maintenance person? Is it, where do you find these guys? How do you incentivize them to stay?
Yeah. Well, where you find them, probably every property has the same set of places that they use as resources. Uh, Indeed's a big one. Facebook's a big one. One that has been very helpful in the types of property that I managed is one that deals with a special niche. Is called Coolworks. I don't know if you've heard of Coolworks before, but Coolworks is it's kind of like an Indeed. It's a job, and people go in there to look for jobs, and they post their resumes. But they're all jobs that are in cool locations, right? And so I call them the professional ski bums. There's a lot of jobs in national parks, and so the clientele is a lot of times the people that want to work someplace for 6 months, have a great experience. They may be working in a national park, and then go and work at a ski resort for 4 or 5 months, and then go work along the coast for the next 6 months. And so the professional ski bums that like to travel and get life experience as they work. And there's a lot of people out there that like to do that. The challenge that comes with that is if you don't have housing available, you're really limiting yourself, especially with that particular website.
How many of your properties had guest house or staff housing?
Roughly half.
Roughly half.
Yeah.
How important is that to hiring?
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge. And certainly the more rural you are, the more important it is. You take an operation like Paws Up, it was a huge operation. We had 250 employees the first year of operation.
That's crazy.
in Greeno, Montana. Greeno was a population of, I think, like 19 people. So most of them, came up from this. So yeah, housing was critical. The owner bought and converted an old motel for his housing needs there. The Hot Springs Resort in Saratoga, Wyoming, the owner did kind of the same, built an apartment complex there. Of course, places like the guest ranch that I managed for the Nature Conservancy, those places are so rural and remote. You have to have housing. You can't operate without it.
If you're gonna build staff housing from the ground up, are you doing like dorm style with bunk beds, or are you trying to make them are you trying to make the units nice so that like a really nice kind of sexy unit, so it's almost a selling point of the job, or like how are you is it like, hey, just utility, or is it?
It depends on the staff you're going after. Now, it is a huge selling point, and especially with the client, the guests that are the prospective employees that were on Coolworks. The type of housing that you have is a big part of it for them. And if you got nice housing, even if it's a position that may offer a little bit less compensation wise, if it's a nice location and nice housing, that can tip the scale for you. It depends on how many staff you need and how much housing you're able to build. And so if you have 250 staff, yeah, you might have to have bunk beds in the rooms and a common kitchen, right? Which is what we did. Certainly places that rely on H-2B visas, a lot of them don't have to be as nice and posh because they're just excited to get here, right? They just want to be able to get over here and work on their visa.
And the H-2Bs, those are international folks coming in, right?
Yes. Yeah, H-2Bs and J-1s are kind of your two resources for getting people to come from another country and work for you for a season.
What's your thoughts on trying to hire international folks and how that impacts the experience on the property, the guest experience and operations?
Well, and again, it depends on your property. a lot of them end up working in national parks, right? Because they just need so many staff. They have to pull from all the resources. Um, I like to, you know, J1. I've had J1Bs. They're hard workers, and they're there, to make money, and they're kind of a captive audience, right? And so they're there, and most of the time they don't have transportation. They don't have a vehicle, and so uh, they're if they're living on property, they're quite frequently available to help cover shifts if needed. And so there's definitely some advantages. Generally getting a hard worker, and you're getting people that will take as much or be very flexible. But also in places like Paws Up, you're getting a lot of people coming from the city, different cities, and they want people that have more of a local flair, right? People that are have more experience in the country. If they're not from Montana and Missoula itself, they want people that at least identify with that and fit that mold, because it's part of the experience. And so I'm not saying that you can't hire someone from Asia and put a cowboy hat on them, but those are all considerations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how did the guest to staff ratios differ from, top echelon Paws Up to ultra luxury, ultra service to, I'd kind of put AutoCamp maybe in the middle tier, and then Wildhaven certainly nice, but I do know it's a mission of Ken to have it be affordable and be accessible glamping that's not out of reach for folks. Like, how does the guest to staff ratio change?
Well, certainly the higher end accommodations have more staff, because there's more to making a bed when you're triple sheeting it, and but it more than just the level of service that you're providing the guests. It's the variety of service that you're providing the guests that is the biggest impactor, right? If Paws Up didn't have an activity department, if people just went there to forced bathe and eat, that would have knocked off a third of their staff right there. So, do you need to provide transportation? And is that something that you include? If it's a Paws Up level experience, a lot of times that's included, where you'll go down and pick them up from the airport, and you get one family, and that's a van, and at a minimum 2 hours, right? So they got to go down and pick them up and pick them back before they can turn around. And so the level of or the size of the operator. How many irons do you have in the fire? Basically, more irons you have in the fire, the more staff you're going to need. And hospitality is so inherently labor intensive already, just with a lodging accommodation. I mean, because they haven't quite yet figured out how to get AI to make a bed. So, and then you add dining. Of course, dining is always labor intensive, because they haven't figured out how to. Same with the cooking and serving. Although you go into McDonald's and you order off of a kiosk, but and some of that is creeping in. A lot of accommodations now have self check-in, and so do you want to reduce your overhead and offer self check-in, or do you want to have that more personal experience and make sure that everyone's greeted with a smile and gives you that opportunity to convey, yeah, we're happy you're here.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? It's like, do you want to cut costs and be lean and go with the automation, or is hospitality having someone who makes you feel another human with a heartbeat, who makes you feel, oh, we're happy you're here?
Yeah.
What's that worth?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of call it the swimming pool effect. Even though it's swimming pool is a little bit of a different animal, but a lot of properties, a lot of hotels, they all have to have swimming pools, right? Or they think that, a lot of times people check in and they always, they'll ask, do you have a swimming pool? They may not even have packed a swimsuit, right? But it's an offering. It's what you offer, and it's what you have available for that guest experience. And so you 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 exponentially extend that out with your activities and your food and beverage, of course, your accommodations, and that customer service is always the cherry on top.
I want to chat a little bit about some of the other properties that you had a chance to work at, and just maybe say if there was any really special offerings or big lessons learned for you from the Nature Conservancy or the hot springs. Would love to hear those, and AutoCamp as well.
Special offerings and lessons learned.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of goes back to what is it that you do, and what is your niche, and you can't be everything to all people, and focusing in on that. When I was at AutoCamp, it was earlier on in the AutoCamp development of the brand, and there was a lot of ideas that went around, and because of the amount of growth that they wanted to achieve, they were very heavy on the corporate end of things. And so there were a lot of ideas that came along with all those people that were occupying space at the table. And I think they went through a learning curve to figure out, well, what makes sense for us? Where's our price point at? Are we uber luxury, or are we one step down? Do we want to provide all these different activities as an additional experience to encourage guests to stay with us, or are we going to lean more heavily on our location? And I think places like AutoCamp and this place, they are where they are because of their location, right? And they already have the draw in place with AutoCamp and Wildhaven. With AutoCamp in Wildhaven, of course, we're situated just outside of Yosemite National Park, and so the majority of our guests are already looking to come to the area. So, what is it that we may be able to offer and entice the guests to come stay with us? That's a little bit special, a little bit different, a little bit unique. Maybe it's yoga in the morning, but it's easy to get carried away with when you first open up a property, or you're under development, and you're getting those comment cards back, and you're poring over all the feedback you get from the guests, and the guest is telling you, hey, you maybe you want to put a different kind of toilet lid on your toilets and your accommodations, and you think, oh, you got to get a different kind of toilet lid for our accommodations now because everyone's going to want this. Focus in on what it is that you do, and do it well. I think is again the big lesson that I learned, and that's it's interesting because the first property that I was at, the homestead. I remember the general manager saying once, you can ask 10 of our guests that say they absolutely love our property what our property means to them, and you'll get 10 different answers. Because they did weddings, they did groups, they had a golf course, they had hot springs, horseback riding. And that's good, if that's your niche. What was the second part of that question?
I guess if there was any lessons learned from each of the properties, and if there was any like real special part of the guest offering.
special part of the guest offering. Each property is unique. And I've been very fortunate again to be in that niche of outdoor boutique properties, and so each one did have something that was special about it. With AutoCamp, it's the Airstreams. The guests get really excited to have that experience of camping inside of an Airstream. So that's really really unique for them. With Wildhaven, we've got really nice accommodations. It's the view that we have right on the ridge. We look over a huge ranch that's under conservation easement that will never change. And people come here and they go, "Oh wow, this view is great. It's amazing." Um, and so whatever it is that makes that individual property unique and special, you take that and you build upon it.
So it's interesting because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but AutoCamp's the only one that was a brand that had multiple locations and had kind of a corporate branch that was a part of it. And I was just curious, like, what's your take of the pros and cons of one, having a branded company with multiple locations and that marketing and advertising and um, more of that some centralized services like accounting and hiring and things like that versus, obviously there's advantages to having a hyper localized property and experience where everyone who's creating the experience is boot on the grounds, but then you don't have some of those benefits of a larger entity that can help with their services and branding and things like that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. For example, before I went to AutoCamp, I used to always joke with my team, it is my dream to have two things, to someday have an HR department or an HR. I'd be happy with an HR manager or even supervisor. It just gives HR anything, HR person off the street, come help. And on property controller. Those were kind of the two things that a lot of times we kind of had to figure out how to compensate to have the lack of in the various properties I was at. So when I went to AutoCamp, that was very nice. That was great. I mean, not only do I have an HR department, but there's multiple people in this department here to help me and staff the operation and to deal with staffing issues and employee issues. And the same with having the controller. Boy, they had it dialed in. They had a controller that was their expertise. That's what they went to school for. Accounting and hospitality. That's my jam. That's what I do. And so, that was a dream, and that was hard to leave. But the flip side of that coin too is I've worked so much and so closely with the owners directly of the properties that I work with, and I'm very much an entrepreneur in heart myself, and I very much enjoy that process. And so having that opportunity to spitball with the owners and to have them bounce things off me and to bring my experience into the brainstorming and to grow and progress a property into something that takes on a life of its own. Yeah, that I really enjoy that aspect of it too, and that was something that was hard to do at AutoCamp, right? Because there was already a whole corporate team doing just that, and so my job was to manage the team.
Yeah, it's like, am I setting up and creating systems and processes and hiring, or am I coming in and taking over and doing what's already been set out? You're executing what's already there.
That's not to say that I didn't have the opportunity to bring my experience to the table and make improvements. Of course, there was those opportunities, but it's different than regularly sitting down with the owner of a property and helping them fulfill their vision.
How often have you at these different properties had to, you know, do sales or be like, hey, we need more heads in beds, we need more occupancy, we need more people coming to the property. You know, what activities can we do? What levers can we pull, whether it's marketing and advertising, press release, you know, outbound sales, group sales, but basically, you know, ownership came to you and they're like, we need to hire occupancy. What are you doing? What's your playbook?
Yeah, most of the properties I've been involved with it, at least to some degree, even way back at the homestead outside of Park City. Um, and all of them were, again, each property is unique, so I had a unique set of needs and challenges. All properties in the category that I would have a high seasonality to them, right? And of course, the summertime uh, is you make hay when the sun is shining. The sun is shining in the summertime. The properties that I was at. And so it's to figure out, in the off seasons, the shoulder seasons in particular, and midweek. Um, and it depend on the property. One one great example that I can think of that was a struggling property when I took it over was the Pine Butte Guest Ranch, again with the Nature Conservancy. Um, and they were struggling with getting their occupancy. They wanted basically a small property like that. Your season's so short; they only operated 5 months out of the year. They needed to be full the whole time, struggling to do that. I was like, well, you got some low hanging fruit here. I mean, you have everyone that already believes in your brand and in your mission, so tap into that. Um, I did have to convince them to develop and build a website that was separate and individual, just for the property. Because before I got there, the website for the property was buried inside the whole Nature Conservancy's website, and you had to navigate to get to it. And then when you got to it, there were links and things that were not related to the property itself. It may be projects that they're doing in other countries, and so it was very confusing to the guests. And that pretty much took an act of Congress to get that permission, because and now you're talking about this huge organization, even though the property itself was so small and what I was really small, but boy, I had a board for the state of Montana, the director of the state of Montana that I worked with, and then the national board, and then the national marketing team, and everyone had to get together and give their stamp of approval. And once we did that, after the first season, it was immediate turnaround for the property. We were full all summer long.
And that was simply creating a separate website for the hospitality.
Simply creating a separate website. Another interesting example that I can think of that is a little bit out of the norm was the Saratoga property. It was a hot springs resort. When I started the property, it was called Saratoga Resort and Spa, and it didn't, nowhere in the name was hot springs. And if you're in this, if you're a spa goer, and that's what you do, you go to resorts for your spa experience. You have a certain kind of
pampering.
Yeah, a certain kind of pampering, a certain image, connotation. This means I'm going to be spoiled. I'm going to go there, and it's very, a lot of times very modern, and I got
robes and cucumbers on the eyes.
Exactly, and that's what the general manager before me was trying to accomplish, but the property itself did not say that. And even though we had a really good spa, and we had great spa therapists, and it was a great part of the experience, it was if people went there because it was a Saratoga Resort and Spa. And they were expecting the spa experience. that's what I was alluding to, selling something that you're not, right? Or that was very much that. And when we made that change, I sat down with the owner and we made the strategic change to change the name to Saratoga Hot Springs Resort. It did two things for us. One, our comment cards started getting a lot better without making any operational changes at all. We just changed the name of the resort. Our comment cards and our guest reviews on Google and TripAdvisor started improving quite a bit, and our occupancy started going up too, because it's like, oh, Hot Springs Resort, yeah, I'm going to go here in the wintertime, and you've got something for me regardless of the season. So that was another kind of out of the box thinking that was a fun success story for us as far as marketing.
Oh, I love it. And I'm actually consulting on a feasibility study for, it's actually with the Indigenous Peoples Tribe, and they have a tourism board, and then their RV park and their hotel are within the visit this tribal area. And that was one of the biggest things. I was like, guys, you have to have your own website. You have to have your own SEO. You need people to be able to find you on Google search and in Google Maps. And also you need your social media channels to be, you can't just have visit this area as the social media channel. You need to have a social media handle specifically for the RV park, specifically for the lodge. They need to be their own things.
Yeah, certainly the temptation there is there to streamline, right? Because the more you streamline, you're saving on resources and time and expense, and but it's confusing. It's confusing, I guess, and it's not a good representation of the different properties in that case.
Tell me about software and what technology or software, what have you come to any of these properties and either they had something that was in place and you're like, this is amazing, or you went somewhere and they didn't have something in place and you're like, we need to get this immediately. This is critical. Like what's the musts? What's critical?
Sure, I maybe I struggle a little bit to identify anything that hits the critical stage. But one thing, I'm a list keeper, or I used to be a list keeper, and that's how I would make sure that I would be meeting my goals and progressing and moving the needle on a day-to-day basis. Is write my list and rewrite my list, and then as I knock off or I hit certain aspects of the list, modify the list. And when I went to AutoCamp, they introduced me to a sauna. And I loved it. I was like, oh, this is great. This is exactly what I needed to get it all into one place and be able to, instead of having to rewrite my list every time that I make an update or something, to be able to make changes, assign it to people, add people in, put in notes, put in pages. So I used Asana there. I brought it over and I use it here at Wildhaven. In my personal life, I use Trello, which is I don't know which one came first. I call it a Asana knockoff, but it's basically the same thing. So that was an exciting discovery for me for organizational purpose. As far as operationally, if you don't have it at a property and it's really hard to function, even on the smaller properties like this, is a maintenance ticketing software. And if you have a bad maintenance ticketing software, it creates a lot more work than the value of the software. So
walk me through that, because I don't really know how that works or how that goes into. I assume someone's in a tent, their handle breaks, and then what happens from there, or like how does that work?
I mean, so a ticket can get created a number of different ways, and so it's not a complex process, but it's an important one and vital to ensuring that the guests have a good experience and that we resolve any issues that come up with the guests. So yeah, something goes wrong in an accommodation. the guest will generally call the front desk, and the front desk will enter it into the ticket software, or, and from there, it gets approved by the manager or supervisor of the maintenance department, and then gets prioritized. Anything that is a guest, uh, anything that can affect the guest experience is always a high priority, right? And no matter what's going on, generally that means we have to drop what we're doing and go address it. Or a housekeeper is going through an accommodation and they find a screw loose or something. So it's the same process. The housekeeper will get on the radio and call the front desk and ask them to enter in a ticket to the maintenance department. And that's really critical, especially, and so it's really critical regardless of how big of an operation you have. But the bigger you get, the temptation is always to, oh, there's a maintenance person, I'm going to grab them, or I'm going to call them right now and have them jump on it. And so that's really, it can be very disruptive to their workflow and what they're trying to accomplish, because they not only have these high critical things, but they have all these other things that have to get done on a daily basis, or even though they may not be high critical, but they have to get done. And if you're constantly pulling a maintenance person off of what they're doing to address something that comes up every time, that's counterproductive as well. And so that's what the ticket software helps you manage and facilitate. It gets put in there, and once it gets submitted, it gets prioritized, and then once it gets prioritized, it goes out to the next available maintenance manager. So yeah, that's
What software do you use for that? Or is
currently
there one you recommend?
yeah, currently we're there's lots of different ones, and they don't have to be fancy. We're using one called Maintain X, MAIN Maintain X, and it works really good for what we're doing. I've used actually a sauna for this purpose at other properties. The sauna has some downfalls as far as closing the communication loop and some other things. But, so yeah, that's one that we found here that we work. A lot of property management systems have them built into them. Unfortunately, the property management system, ResNexus, that we have, it doesn't have a viable option. So.
Yeah, let's talk about PMS. Is there any PMS that you prefer to work with, and is there any that you try to avoid?
Unfortunately, more often than not, you don't get to avoid it by choice unless you take over a property and you can convince the owner that it's costing them, efficiency and time and money because the system is antiquated or poor, or anyone that and I would avoid. I don't know. When I started with the resort at Paws Up, we used one called Maestro, which was brand new right out of the chute, and it was really clunky. It was riddled with bugs and errors. I'm sure if I looked at it now, I wouldn't even recognize it because it looked more DOS based even at the time, and now it's a Windows based. And so, it depends on your property and what's a good fit for your property. A lot of glamping properties use the one that we're using now called ResNexus. And it is designed specifically for campgrounds or glamp grounds or boutique properties, a lot of standalone properties, and they're designed to be easily run and managed by the owners of the said properties, which has both pros and cons. It's really easy to use and operate. But it doesn't have some things that you would typically find in a hospitality operation system that you're like, well, why, why, why can't I do that? It seems like a no-brainer. For example, when you check someone out of a room, it doesn't automatically, create the process for your housekeeping to go from dirty, and then so you got to actually manually go in. You can check someone into a room a year from now. It's just a checkbox. It really doesn't have any functionality of how. So it doesn't have those safeguards, and you can you can check someone into a dirty room. It doesn't have those safeguards in place. But the trade-off is it is super user friendly, and it is very um, functional for what the again they've identified who their client is and who they're going after, and they're focusing in on that. It also does really good um, from my experience with working with third parties, OTAs, and the integration with the reservation system. It's very robust, one that you would anticipate would only be available for large scale properties. So that's very nice, because we do get a huge percentage of our clientele that come to us through online travel agencies like Expedia.
Mm-hmm. Got it. That is super helpful. All right. So what's when you look to the horizon, Scott, in the next like 5 to 10 years, what does the future look like for you in hospitality?
The crystal ball. Um, well, I, first off, I would say if you were to ask me that question at just about any property that I've had the um, privilege of working with, I could very well say I'm going to retire here, because they've all been great properties and great experiences. So I've been very fortunate in that regard. So in that same thread with Wildhaven, I could retire here. It's a young property. The ownership's great. Ken and Brian, they've got a great vision, and um, with two properties under their belt and more to come, it's exciting to be in on the ground level of the expansion and development of this company. So um, yeah, that's certainly a possibility. I mentioned before that as an entrepreneur, and I'm an entrepreneur in heart. So I've always kind of had one eye open for an opportunity to do go into my own hospitality realm. And actually, at one point, I did get very close. Um, just after I left Paws Up, I found a piece of property that was 3 miles from the south rim of the Grand Canyon and in the middle of the Kaibab National Forest, that was repossessed by the bank, and the bank had accepted my offer, and I was going to go all in on it to create um, a glamping property 3 miles from the south rim of the Grand Canyon. But unfortunately, the county of Coconino had other plans.
Moratorium. They are tough.
Yeah, it would have required a zoning change,
Yeah.
and while it was nice to have that experience and to dream big with it, the, the the potential of actually receiving that zoning change from the county of Coconino was pretty slim. So
What's that's a good segue. If you had, 5 to $10 million to build kind of your dream glamping property, something realistic. But what location, what unit types, what would the guest experience be? What would you create?
boy, that's tough. Uh, someplace unique, um, which every property I've been at falls into that category. Um, Man, I love the mountains. I love the Rocky Mountains. I loved my time in Montana and Wyoming. So beautiful. Definitely left our heart there. But as a California native, um, and I did also shovel a lot more snow than I was accustomed to growing up in California. And so, the nicer climates, something along the coast or maybe even tropical, is very appealing as well too. So, uh, what what would it be? Uh, you know, it's easy to draw towards the Paws Up model because that was one, my first glamping property, and two, just the remote beautiful uh, uh, setting of being on the Blackfoot River. um, I can see doing something like that, but then again, if I had an opportunity to do either bungalows or something glamping on Maui, I might be up for that challenge.
Gosh, I'm not aware of any glamping out on the Hawaiian Islands yet, at least something that's really
Not,
prominent.
yeah, I mean overwater bungalows and things like that, but that's not, yeah, that's a little different.
Very cool. And do you have any asks of the audience or any if people want to get in touch with you, best way for them to do that?
Oh, sure. They can always email me. It's just Scott at wildhavenyosemite.com. Um, my asks of the audience, uh, just the vast. I do this because I love it, and I'm a host in heart, right? I'm in that category that I look for in the staff, and I love being a host. Um, and I love uh, being a host and providing experiences to the guests. And I also love helping the staff learn that and to provide that experience to the guests. And so, uh, while 99% of the guests, even higher percent of the guests that we have are so wonderful and great, um, there's always the challenging ones that remember, your servers and your housekeepers, uh, those are real people, and they've got real uh, dreams and ambitions and challenges and stuff too. So be good to them. Be good to them.
I love it. I love it. From Mr. Outdoor Hospitality himself. I'm gonna coin that.
I might have to update my resume or something.
Well, this has been
Quite
an
the honor.
yeah, this has been an absolute pleasure just diving into your treasure trove of experience, really witnessing and being a part of the evolution of it across, the Western United States. And, we have a guy named Jacob Halverson on the podcast a lot. He's now the, head of guest experience at Auberge in New Mexico.
Yeah,
Before that, he was at Mendocino, and before
yeah.
that, he was at the Society Hotel.
I've
And
spoken to him. Yeah.
oh, you know Jacob? Oh, too funny. Well, I feel like you two, I always appreciate it because he's been at some real staple properties in the U.S. and he's big. I feel like you guys have very tangential stories. You're just maybe 10 years ahead of him in his hospitality career. But it'd be very fun to have both of you guys on in a double header episode where you could kind of ping pong and, we could throw some questions out to the both of you and
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
would be a
yeah,
lot
no,
of fun.
yeah. He's got some great experience, and it's been very helpful. Too. I've learned a few things from him.
And so you've spoken with him or worked with him, or what was the context of
Yeah.
how you guys know each other?
The we were I explained to the current owners um, of the property that I'm currently at the value of having your own laundry facility, which, I mean, we can have a whole podcast uh, on itself just on the value of having your own laundry facility. But So I was talking to him about that, and they knew Jacob and talked to him. So they got the four of us on a call together, me, Jacob, and the two owners of Wildhaven, to kind of spitball about what 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 would be ideal for our current situation and our laundry needs. So that's how I got introduced to him and got to chat with him.
Too
So,
funny. Great.
yeah,
Well, maybe we could have all you guys on a podcast. We'll hop on an episode together.
yeah.
Awesome, Scott. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll chat again here at some point soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Connor. It was a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I don't get to talk about my experiences a whole lot.
Well, we're always here, and I'm sure we'll have you back on. All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care.